If you think restaurant food is starting to taste the same, not only are you correct, you're actually onto something far worse than you might realize. No matter where you go nowadays, restaurant prices are rising and menus all look the same. And one reason is those restaurants are all owned by a few private equity-backed groups. But the truth is, they're not actually the only ones you should blame here. Look, I know it's easy to blame them, but private equity has been in restaurants since the 90s, so why is it that only recently food tastes like shit? The bigger problem is supply. A few companies control the supply of food to over 650,000 locations, from your local diner to that fancy white cloth dinner. So there's a good chance your favorite homemade dish at your neighborhood spot probably came from the same factory that's also increasingly supplying hospitals, prisons, and schools. And as I'll reveal, it's creating an interesting paradox, where mom and pop shops are disappearing and restaurants are becoming either low-tier slop bowls or high-end luxury dining. But even with restaurants dividing into these two extremes, the experience everywhere is becoming the exact same, from the look, taste, and paying more for less. And if something isn't done, we won't just be eating worse. We will be losing one of the last things Americans can all enjoy. And in a country this divided, that might actually be the last thing we can afford to lose.
The entire slop bowl industry and the commercial real estate market are interconnected.
Corporate slop bowls, food that's designed to keep the body alive but kill the human soul.
Good food should belong to everybody.
So if I'm gonna be real with you, one of the biggest reasons I made this video is because I've been frustrated with the restaurants where I live here in Austin. It's overpriced for mediocre food, and it's easily the most overrated foodie city in the country. But as I found, and as you'll see, this is a problem across America. So if that's the case, surely it's because of private equity, right? I mean, it's not far off. Private equity is buying up all your favorite restaurants, loading them up with debt, cheapening the ingredients, and firing half the staff. And they're consolidating a lot of restaurants under a few brands, like Inspire Brand, backed by private equity firm Roark Capital, and one of the largest fast food groups in the world, owning Subway, Arby's, Baskin Robbins, just to name a few. There's a few other big restaurant groups doing the exact same thing. So yeah, maybe it is easy to just point the finger at private equity and call it a day. But here's the thing. If incentives reveal outcomes, the last thing private equity would want to do is to make their restaurants go to shit. Sure, they make money regardless through management fees, but the real money comes from achieving growth. When 3G Capital bought a struggling Burger King after the 2008 crash, they did cut a bunch of costs, but they also helped turn the company around. It's a big reason Burger King expanded internationally, and by the end of it, 3G Capital and its co-investors became $14 billion richer. So what I'm trying to say is that it would be disingenuous to say that private equity hasn't helped restaurants. They've been in the space now for over 2 decades, and for most of the time, it worked. Customers kept coming and sales kept growing. Which brings us back to the question, if they're so good at this, why is food only now really starting to taste like doo-doo? Well, here's the thing. The private equity playbook has always cut costs, but there's a case to be made that those cuts have finally hit a breaking point. See, in other industries, private equity can cut corners and customers have no choice but to deal with it. When they buy up houses, they use cheaper materials, but you still need a place to live. When they buy retail stores, they replace workers with kiosks, and most customers tolerate it, sometimes even prefer it. But restaurants are different. You need people to cook, you need people to serve, and when you start slashing staff, shrinking portions, swapping fresh ingredients for frozen ones, and refuse to invest in anything long-term, customers notice. And unlike housing where supply is limited, restaurants are everywhere. There's a new spot opening on every corner, so when diners are paying more for smaller portions and worse food, they have choice. But as you'll see later, even that choice is becoming limited. So point is, private equity isn't blameless, and now it's starting to backfire after years of running restaurants with spreadsheets, not taste. But at the end of the day, private equity still only accounts for 10% of restaurants. So if we're seeing this across almost all restaurants, then who is to blame for this sudden decline? Turns out, it's not those who's buying the restaurants, it's who's feeding them. Because behind almost every restaurant, be it a chain or your local bistro, there's the same small group of giant distributors supplying them all. And once you realize this, you'll see you never really had choice to begin with. For most of the 20th century, restaurants bought their ingredients from local suppliers, butchers, bakers, and other small distributors. But today, that model has quietly been replaced by these broadline distributors. A broadliner is kind of like a Costco for restaurants. One company that can sell you everything you need to run a food business, from meat, produce, canned goods, napkins, cleaning supplies, pre-made desserts, even the to-go containers. And there's one name dominating the industry: Sysco. Founded in 1969, Sysco didn't just grow organically, but by merging 9 smaller distributors into the first true national food service supplier. Over the decades, Sysco has acquired well over 150 smaller companies and rolled them into its empire, where now only 2 competitors like US Foods and Performance Food Group remain. And these companies form such a monopoly that Sysco and US Foods are estimated to control 75% of the food distribution market, serving not just 450,000 restaurants, but also 200,000 more hotels, hospitals, schools, and prisons. So if I had to bet a lot of money, we've all tasted Sysco food without you even knowing it. The question becomes, why are restaurants even going along with this? It's because Sysco knows who they're selling to a T, and it's because they help create the conditions around it. Look, running a restaurant is brutal business. The margins are notoriously low even at the best of times. And in a recent survey, 9 out of 10 operators said that labor costs are a big challenge, and a lot of restaurants struggle to find staff to meet that demand. So if only there was a pre-prepped everything that not only saves money, but also saves time for the existing staff that's already overworked and often underpaid, especially if that restaurant is owned by private equity. And that's exactly what Sysco provides, because they're not just supplying ingredients, they're buying pre-baked bread, sauces, desserts, and even that expensive steak that you might have just ordered might be one of their pre-grilled steak strips. But as I mentioned, the bigger underlying reason is that these restaurants are going with a Sysco isn't because they just want to, but because of the immense power that they hold. And because of that power, they can raise prices at a whim, have late or damaged deliveries or ingredient swaps, and especially small restaurants in rural areas don't really have any negotiating power because they don't really have any other choice. And that monopoly that they pretty much hold almost became even more powerful in 2015. Sysco tried to merge with US Foods, but that deal was blocked by the FTC after they found that they would have controlled 75% of the national market. But even just a few months ago, another merger was attempted between US Foods, and this time with Performance Food, to create the largest food distributor in the US, but they actually ultimately scrapped talks due to similar antitrust concerns just this November. But even with failed mergers, it hasn't stopped them from expanding to more restaurants. Because if you thought that this only applies to fast food joints, think again. Even in fine dining restaurants, there's a growing demand for pre-cut, pre-washed, and pre-prepped items, and it's exactly why menus across the nation are all starting to look the same, no matter what price point and where you eat. So whether it's a hole in the wall or a fancy restaurant downtown, in many ways they're all doing this because it's now one of the only choices, and it becomes a necessity to keep up with the rising costs of everything. So yeah, private equity is partly to blame, but these food distributors are the one who has created this ingredient monoculture, where the inputs are the same, then the output starts to taste the same, and the only difference now is the restaurant sign and their interior designs. But even that's about to change. Because an unusual paradox is forming where things are becoming extreme, but also the same. And news can feel the same way. You scroll long enough and it's extreme outrage from both sides, but it all feels the same. This is why I've been using our sponsor, Straight Arrow News. Straight Arrow News delivers news the way it should be. Clear, balanced, and focused on facts that you can actually trust. And you get context and multiple viewpoints and deeper explanations so you understand what is happening instead of reacting to whatever headline is designed to go viral. And the best part is that it actually helps you spend less time guessing which source to believe. You can follow the topics you care about, build your own personalized queue, and watch anytime on the app or redesigned website. Go to san.com/gen or scan the QR code and start getting better news today. And now back to the paradox I was talking about. Because what we're starting to see is a weird paradox in the restaurant industry, where at the same time everything tastes and feels the same, a weird economic horseshoe is forming where the extremes are squeezing out the middle. And even those extremes are also starting to look the same, which all this kind of sounds crazy and confusing, but bear with me, it will all make sense in a second. Just like the middle class in the US is disappearing, so are the mid-tier restaurants. And what we're left with are increasingly polar opposites between low-tier fast food and high-end luxury dining. As you can guess, a lot of it is driven by inflation and economic uncertainties, as eating out is becoming more of a luxury for some families, and these people are choosing the extremes for that reason. Instead of going to that local restaurant with mid-tier prices, they may just trade down by grabbing a fast food burger here and there, or if they decide to eat out, treat it as a special occasion to go big on a fancy dinner. So due to this, the social experience of dining is changing to be either a utilitarian or luxury, and those mid-tier restaurants that are mostly mom and pop restaurants and that don't have centralized prep kitchens, bulk purchasing contracts, or Wall Street money are increasingly getting squeezed from both sides. Once they're out, the landlords want to replace them with reliable tenants, so franchises are swooping in to take their place. And nothing encapsulates this better than corporate slop bowls. The food that's designed to keep the body alive but kill the human soul. The bland, beige, sad mush of chicken, quinoa, and lettuce designed to be eaten fast and efficiently during your 15-minute lunch break before you go back to your cubicle and your Excel spreadsheets. Kava, Sweetgreen, Chipotle, they've colonized every financial district, occupying the exact real estate that used to belong to actual restaurants. And you know who has a significant ownership stake in all three? That's right, it's BlackRock and Vanguard, the very same asset management companies whose wage slaves rely on these bowls for sustenance. And here's the thing, these slot bowls were supposed to be the cheap option, but even this budget, fast casual food has become overpriced. And Chipotle is probably the worst example, raising their prices 6 times since 2021. Can you believe it used to cost only this? And as every city continues to get divided in these two extremes, an interesting thing is happening where even the extremes are starting to look the same. Because the absence of these mid-tier restaurants created a vacuum, and investors rushed in not to fund creative food, but to fund concepts. This is why every new American restaurant in the country suddenly has exposed brick, light bulbs hanging from the ceiling, hard as fuck metal chairs where you can't sit for more than 30 minutes, and some corny live, love, laugh sign in the restaurant, all to eat a $24 burger. So why do you think I hate Austin food so much? It's because it's full of these soulless restaurants like this. But the thing is, it's not an accident. It's happening everywhere. I think you all know this, but the restaurant business is a cutthroat business, and investors don't want creativity. They want provable, scalable concepts so their restaurant doesn't go under in 5 years. But what this has created now, though, is chefs that actually want to create authentic, innovative restaurants have a lot harder of a time breaking through to investors or customers. And with the rise of delivery apps, it's further resulting in trading authentic food for convenience. With delivery apps taking 15 to 30% of every order, restaurants have redesigned menus around stuff that travels well in a DoorDash box. So nothing delicate, nothing fragile, just wings, burgers, fries, and slop bowls, anything you can make in bulk, box cheaply, and later stuff in a microwave. You can see now how we've ended up in this kind of culinary horseshoe, where the low tier and the high end restaurants are slowly bending towards each other, melting into one giant slop bowl of this unseasoned mix of identical corporate investors, suppliers, and templated concepts. And America's restaurant landscape is starting to look like the country itself, split into two extremes with nothing in the middle. But what no one has talked about is how this vicious cycle goes way beyond restaurants. It's actually a larger commentary of something bigger happening in American culture. Because I think you can all agree that eating food isn't just about getting fed, it's a ritual that everyone can share. But when all that is being abandoned for this pursuit of endless convenience and efficiency, the consequence will be losing something far more important in the process. And if something isn't done, there will be no shared experiences left. Because even if you are one of those people that only eat food for subsistence, You can't deny that forever, that family-owned diner was one of the few third places that the community didn't just go for special occasions, but places where you can just go to. I mean, think about how many movies in the 90s and early 2000s used diners, coffee shops, and little cafes as their backdrop. And even if the country was indeed as divided as it is right now, restaurants like that were a small glue where people could just exist with other people. But as more and more of those restaurants struggle or close or resort to cutting corners with a Cisco in order to stay alive, we're losing that culture and connection. And as more competition is eliminated with consolidation, it looks like it might get even worse as you continue to pay more for less. And yeah, it's tempting to just blame corporations or private equity or the system, but here's the uncomfortable truth. Somewhere along the way, we've all quietly accepted this. We've normalized mediocrity. From airlines that actually used to be nice, housing that was a core component of the American dream, and entertainment like I talked about in my piracy video, and on. So we can blame all those entities all we want, and we would be justified in that, but we've also are the ones who normalize mediocrity in exchange for convenience. But there is hope. A lot of millennials and Gen Z are looking at corporate slop bowls and realizing that they're only paying for branding in some form of nostalgia, and it's not just worth it. The slop companies are taking the hit. Sweetgreen stock is down almost 90% after their IPO, and Cava and Chipotle is tremendously down from their previous highs. Because surprise, surprise, people don't want to pay $17 for some soulless mush. And so here's some hope I can leave you. Unlike housing or airlines where you're stuck with limited options, food is one area where you actually have a choice. Look, you can keep ordering the slop bowl, or you can pay a few dollars more for that local spot that's actually trying to maintain one of the last things we can all enjoy. And I know what you're thinking, it's just dinner, it's not that deep. But that's where you're wrong. The more you choose convenience and accept the mediocrity that comes with it, the more you're voting for the kind of culture you want to keep alive. So there's a lot more I can say on this topic, and I'll be diving even deeper into this next week in my free newsletter in the video description. But if you haven't seen my video on how we've accepted mediocrity in entertainment, go and watch our video on how private equity made piracy great again, and like this video to continue learning how money and power works. Thanks.